My name is Ephraim Friedman. I am 40 years old. And to my family, I am a computer engineer working for the Israeli Ministry of Security, specializing in surveillance systems management and cybersecurity. That is what my mother, my brother, even my rabbi believe. And for a long time, it was true. But 2 years ago, after yet another night spent on my knees praying in solitude, I realized I could no longer stay behind a screen while others fought with body and soul. I had above average physical abilities, endurance, and precision, but above all, I had faith, a ruthlessly clear, unwavering faith. So I chose to go to the front lines. Since then, I have been part of the clandestine operational units of Sayeret Matkal, the ones that don't appear in the news, the ones that exist only in the deepest corridors of Central Command. By the end of 2025, tension reached a breaking point that the public could only sense through the rising cost of fuel and the frantic movements of diplomats on television. The war that had been simmering for decades was no longer a shadow. It was an erupting volcano on multiple fronts. The alert in Israel was at its absolute maximum, especially in the north and east. We received the order on the evening of December 20th, a lightning mission, codename Ashana, which in Hebrew means smoke of deception. The objective was surgical and devastating. Neutralize an underground power line in Kershaw Province, Iran, that powered a secret complex containing undeclared nuclear devices. Intelligence had known for weeks that the facility was nearing a critical phase. We had to operate in a team of only 2. The access points were impenetrable for a larger squad, and the escape window was practically non-existent. Command wanted 2 tight-knit men capable of moving as one biological unit. That is why they called me and Jason. Jason was not just a companion, he was my mirror. An American convert to Judaism, he joined the Special Forces with the same desperate fervor I felt. We had shared dozens of operations, the kind where a single heartbeat out of sync means the end. A single word was enough for us to understand each other. No one laughed at his jokes but me, and no one understood mine but him. He had no family left either. We had chosen the same path, to dedicate every beat, every breath, to defending our land and serving God. We crossed the final operational border at dawn on December 21st, 2025. We had studied every detail for months. The guard shifts, the infrared blind spots, the exact resonance of the security fences. But that evening, as soon as we entered the target zone, the atmosphere felt heavy, charged with a premonition of disaster. It was as if the earth itself was waiting for us to fail. We felt the air vibrating too silent for a high-security facility. There were too many roadblocks, too many electronic eyes active in areas that should have been dormant. We were supposed to be in a blind zone, but instead, it felt as though we were walking through a forest of invisible eyes. We moved through the shadows wearing thermal dissipation suits, our movements calibrated to avoid triggering even the most sensitive seismic sensors. Our hands were sweaty, even inside the reinforced tactical gloves. Our hearts remained calm due to years of training, but our guts screamed a warning. Jason looked at me, his face obscured by the night vision gear, and we both understood that the mission had been compromised before we even set foot on the sand. Then came the sound no operative ever wants to hear. That thin, acidic hum that cuts through the air like a high-frequency blade. A CASF 2K drone. A heat-chasing hunter loaded with anti-personnel grenades. We heard it directly above our heads, then saw the sudden tilt of its wings as it locked on. There was only time for a whispered curse and a frantic dive for cover. The light changed instantly. A flash, a roar, a tremor in the earth that felt like the planet was cracking open. A grenade exploded a few meters from Jason. My left ear lost its balance of sound, replaced by a high-pitched ringing that seemed to consume my brain. I screamed his name. I screamed it 3 times without even hearing my own voice. He tried to get up, but the blood stained the sand with a deep, dark hue, flowing like wine poured on an altar during a sacrifice. My legs propelled me toward him, but another deflagration hit me with the force of a heavenly punch. I flew through the air, or maybe I simply crumpled where I stood. I don't know. I only know that I saw Jason's face for a final moment. His eyes were wide, still open, reflecting the fire, then everything turned black. Total, majestic, disturbing black. There was no more time, no sound, no weight. Only a distant echo of sirens and the sensation of falling into a warm, deep void, as if God himself was pulling me toward a destination I wasn't yet ready to acknowledge. It was there, in the unreal silence of that suspension, that I realized I was dying. The date was December 21st, 2025, and my service to the State of Israel had ended, while my service to the King of Kings was just beginning. There was no falling, no flying. I don't remember going through a tunnel or seeing my body from outside like in those stories you hear in documentaries. There was only an unreal suspension, as if the entire universe had held its breath for a single instant. I was there in the middle of that vibrant nothingness, conscious of having no more weight, yet existing in every sense. It was as if time itself had lost meaning. There were no seconds, no hours, only an eternal present. I knew I was somewhere else, and I knew with a certainty that went beyond logic that it was not a dream. It couldn't be. Dreams have blurry edges. They dissolve. Here, everything was precise, defined, more real than reality itself. Initially, it was the light that struck me. Not just any light, but a luminous presence. It didn't dazzle. It didn't hurt. It was alive. It breathed. It had an essence. It was as if that light had known me forever, had counted my every step and listened to my every prayer, even those I had never uttered with my lips. I don't know how long I remained there, suspended and enveloped by that weightless reality, but I know that at some point the light moved, and within the light, a figure emerged. It stood still. It did not advance, yet it grew closer. It did not speak, yet I already heard its words. I did not need to ask who it was. Every fiber of my spirit trembled before that presence. It was Jesus, not the Jesus of Byzantine icons or the statues I had seen in Jerusalem during my rare walks in the Christian Quarter. Not a symbol, not a name, but a real person, extraordinarily alive, absolutely present. His eyes were fire and water together. When they looked at me, I felt naked to the soul, but I felt no shame, only a kind of surrender, a sweet and necessary surrender. He called me by name, but it was not a physical voice. It was an inner vibration, as if every cell had heard Aliyah spoken simultaneously. And then he added, "I have brought you here because time is short. You are my witness. I will reveal to you what is hidden so that you may tell those who still have ears to hear. But first, look." The light began to dissolve into images, not dreamlike visions, but concrete scenes, as if projected onto a larger reality. A map of the world took shape, and at its center were cities I knew well. New York, Jerusalem, Tehran, London, Chicago, Toronto, Berlin, and above each, signs. Some flashed like alarms, others were obscured by black clouds. He showed me the spiritual architecture of the world, and it was crumbling. He showed me that the physical conflicts I had fought in were merely the shadows of a much greater war. "The world thinks the danger is in the missiles," he said, though his lips did not move. "But the danger is in the sleep of the soul." I saw the dates beginning to flicker before my eyes, moving past my death on December 21st, 2025, and into the immediate future. The clock was not a piece of machinery. It was a living pulse in the spirit. I felt the transition into the new year, a year that would be unlike any other in human history. The weight of the silence in that celestial space was heavier than any atmospheric pressure I had felt during deep dive training. Jesus stood before me, and the light radiating from him was not just illumination. It was information, history, and truth woven into a single beam. He turned his gaze toward the horizon of the spirit, and the first specific date of the new year materialized in the air, glowing with an amber intensity. "Look at the first threshold," he said. The date was January 31st, 2026. I saw the world below, but it was viewed through a filter that revealed the spiritual electricity of the planet. I saw the great financial hubs, Wall Street, London, Tokyo, Hong Kong. On this day, a sudden, inexplicable stillness fell over the digital networks. It wasn't a mere hack or a solar flare, it was a sovereign pause. I saw millions of people staring at their devices, their faces reflecting the blue light of empty screens. The global banking system stuttered. For 24 hours, the illusion of wealth vanished. I saw the panic in the eyes of men who had built their entire identity on numbers in a ledger. Jesus whispered, "On January 31st, 2026, I will show the world that their towers of Babel are built on sand. The digital gods will fail, and for a brief moment, the silence will force them to hear the beating of their own fearful hearts. Many will use this day to plot more control, but my children will use it to find their knees." The vision shifted rapidly into February 2026. The atmosphere grew colder, not just in temperature, but in the spirit of the masses. I saw the streets of major Western cities, Toronto, Chicago, Paris. There was a pervasive sense of betrayal. The governments promised peace and stability, but instead, I saw bread lines and the rationing of energy. Yet the most disturbing part of this vision was not the physical hunger. It was the religious response. I was taken inside a massive, ornate cathedral in Europe. The architecture was breathtaking, but as I looked closer, the stones were gray and lifeless. A high-ranking religious leader stood at the pulpit, draped in gold and heavy fabrics. He spoke of global solidarity and humanistic divinity, but he never mentioned the blood of the Lamb or the necessity of repentance. His words were like hollow bells. I looked at the congregation. They were nodding, their spirits draped in a thick, suffocating fog. This is the month of the Great Compromise, Jesus told me. In February 2026, the institutional religions will marry the spirit of the world to survive the coming famine. They will trade the truth of my word for a seat at the table of the powerful. They believe they are being wise, but they are becoming the very cage that holds the souls of the lost captive. Suddenly, the scene changed to a small, damp basement in a country where Bibles were forbidden. I saw 12 people huddled together. They didn't have gold or music or spotlights. They had one tattered book and a single candle. Their faces were radiant. I saw the signature of the heart on them, the first sign he had told me about. Their pulses beat in sync with the heart of Christ. These are my hidden ones, Jesus said. While the great cathedrals fall into bed with the beast, these few will carry the fire. In 2026, the visible church will grow dark, but the invisible church will become a sun. By March 2026, the clock of the sifting began to tick louder. I saw a vision of the Mediterranean Sea. The waters were turbulent, and I saw naval vessels from a dozen nations positioning themselves in a formation that looked like a tightening noose around the Middle East. The political rhetoric had reached a fever pitch. But then, my attention was pulled away from the warships to a specific event in the United States. I saw a massive earthquake, not just of the earth, but of the social order. A scandal of such proportions broke out in March 2026 that it shattered the last remnants of public trust in the judicial system. I saw the halls of justice in Washington, D.C. filled with smoke, not the smoke of fire, but the smoke of deception that had finally become too thick to hide. People poured into the streets, not to protest for justice, but to vent a rage that was demonic in origin. The lawlessness is the fruit of the absence of my spirit, Jesus observed. They rejected my law, so now they are left with no law at all. March 2026 will be the month when the world realizes that without the Prince of Peace, there is only the spirit of the assassin. The vision then deepened into the 7 signs, the signs he had mentioned earlier, but now they were being applied to the people living through these specific months of 2026. He showed me the second mark, the love for truth. I saw a young woman working in a high-level government office. She was presented with a document that required her to sign off on a lie that would facilitate the persecution of religious extremists. I felt her terror. I felt the weight of her career, her safety, and her reputation. But as she looked at the paper, a flame ignited in her spirit. She refused. She walked out, leaving everything behind. She has the mark, Jesus said with a smile that contained the warmth of 1,000 suns. In 2026, the cost of truth will become everything. Those who are willing to pay it are the only ones who truly know me. Then came the third sign, the hunger for holiness. As the world became more debased in April 2026, I saw a peculiar phenomenon. In the midst of the chaos and the rising darkness, a remnant of young people began to loathe the filth of the culture. I saw them throwing away their devices, walking away from the worship of images in Hollywood that I had seen earlier. They weren't being legalistic. They were being desperate. They were like men in a desert who had found a spring of pure water and could no longer stand the taste of salt. I am purifying my priests, Jesus declared. The world is becoming a cesspool so that my children will finally crave the fragrance of heaven. April 2026 will be the month of the great separation in the private lives of my people. The hidden sins will either be repented of or they will become a millstone. I saw the clock again. It was hovering over a map of Israel. The date flickered. May 14th, 2026, the anniversary of the nation's rebirth. But the atmosphere was somber. I saw a shadow looming over Jerusalem, a darkness that seemed to emanate from the very ground. I saw the Temple Mount, and for a moment the air vibrated with a sound that was both ancient and terrifying. The sound of an approaching storm that no iron dome could intercept. "The time of Jacob's trouble is intensifying," he said, and I felt a pang of grief for my people. "But even in the fire I am there. I am the Lion of Judah, and I have not forgotten my covenant. But the flesh must be stripped away so the spirit can cry out, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai." I was then shown the fourth sign, the fruits of the Spirit, manifesting in the most unlikely places. I saw a prison camp in a region I recognized as Northern East Asia. It was June 2026. The conditions were horrific, but in the center of the misery, I saw a man sharing his meager ration of water with a guard who had beaten him an hour before. That act of kindness glowed with a golden light that pushed back the demonic shadows of the prison. "This is the evidence," Jesus said. "In the year of the sifting, the religious will become more bitter, but the redeemed will become more like me. You cannot fake this fruit when the winter of the soul arrives." The transition into the midyear of 2026 was marked by a sudden intensification of the invisible seal, the fifth sign. I saw a spiritual barrier being erected around certain households. While the world was being ravaged by new engineered plagues and social collapses, these homes remained in a bubble of supernatural peace. It wasn't that they were exempt from trouble, but that the spirit of fear that was strangling the globe could not cross the threshold. "They have been sealed by the blood," Jesus whispered. "They do not fear the news because they are listening to the Spirit." July 2026 will be the month when the difference between the protected and the exposed becomes undeniable. As these visions poured into me, I felt my old soldier's mind trying to categorize, to strategize, to find a way to warn the command. But I realized there was no tactical solution to a spiritual apocalypse. The only strategy was surrender. The celestial clock did not stop at the mid-year mark. It seemed to gain a terrible rhythmic momentum, each tick echoing like the fall of a heavy axe against the roots of a tree. Jesus remained beside me, his presence the only anchor in a sea of shifting prophetic images. As a soldier, I had been trained to anticipate the enemy's next move. But here, the enemy was the very stubbornness of the human heart, and the move was a divine intervention that no military intelligence could have predicted. "The harvest is ripening," he said, and the date August 15th, 2026, surged forward. I saw a vision of the skies over the northern hemisphere. It was not a storm of clouds, but a storm of light. Scientists on the ground were frantic, pointing to solar flares and atmospheric anomalies, but I saw the truth. The veil between the dimensions was thinning. In August 2026, a silent sky event occurred. For 3 hours, every electronic communication on Earth ceased. No satellites, no radio, no internet. But in that silence, a frequency from heaven was released. I saw people in the streets of Berlin and Tokyo clutching their chests. They weren't in physical pain. They were experiencing a weight of glory that their sin-laden souls could not process. To the redeemed, it was a moment of ecstatic communion. To the religious but lost, it was a moment of paralyzing terror. I saw a man in a high-rise office in London fall to his knees, weeping because he finally realized that his soul was hollow. "This is the famine of the word," Jesus explained. "In August 2026, I will remove the easy access to my truth. The digital Bibles will be corrupted by algorithms, and the preachers of prosperity will lose their voices. Only those who have hidden my word in their hearts will have light to walk by. The rest will stumble in a darkness that no lamp can pierce." Then, the vision shifted to September 22nd, 2026. The date glowed with a sickly, pale green light. I saw a massive assembly in a neutral territory, perhaps Switzerland or a reclaimed zone in the Middle East. Leaders of all major world religions were signing a document called the Covenant of Universal Harmony. It looked like peace. It sounded like love. But as I looked at the ink on the paper, I saw it was mixed with the ash of burned scriptures. This was the manifestation of the sixth sign, the break with the world. I saw a group of believers in North America who refused to acknowledge this covenant. Because they would not bow to this integrated deity, they were stripped of their right to participate in the new digital economy. I saw families losing their homes, their cars, and their status in a single day. The world will offer a peace that requires the surrender of the cross, Jesus said. In September 2026, the sifting will reach the pockets of my people. Many who said they loved me will choose their comforts over my name. They will say, God understands my heart, while they sign their souls away to the system, but my true ones will embrace the desert, for they know that I am the manna. The clock then turned to October 2026. This was the month of the seventh sign, the compassion for the lost. Amidst the increasing persecution and the collapsing social structures, I saw a supernatural move of evangelism. I saw a woman in a crowded subway in New York. She was thin, clearly hungry, and being mocked by those around her for her faith. But when a man beside her collapsed from a sudden heart ailment, she didn't just pray. She looked into his eyes with a love so fierce it seemed to physically push back the death looming over him. She shared her last piece of bread and whispered the name of Jesus. I saw thousands of secret missionaries emerging in October 2026. These weren't people sent by organizations, but individuals moved by the Holy Spirit. They moved through the chaos like ghosts of mercy, healing the sick and preaching the gospel in the shadows of the ruins. The darker the night, the more precious the candle, Jesus remarked. In October 2026, the love of many will grow cold, but the love of my remnant will become a furnace. They will love their enemies even as they are being led to the slaughter. This is the mark that the world cannot counterfeit. Then came a vision that made my spirit recoil. It was November 2026, the month of the fallen cedars. I saw a sequence of faces, men I had seen on Christian television, authors of best-selling religious books, leaders of denominations. One by one, I saw them being unmasked, not by the media, but by their own hidden lusts and greeds. The sifting was now operating in the highest tiers of the church hierarchy. I saw a massive stadium where a famous healer was performing. As he reached out his hand, instead of the power of God, I saw a dark, murky shadow emanate from him. The people were falling, but they weren't being healed. They were being infested with a spirit of delusion. Jesus pointed to him. He started with me, but he ended with himself, he said, and there was a profound sadness in his voice. In November 2026, I will pull back the curtain on the religious performers. The great apostasy is not just people leaving the church. It is the church leaving the truth while keeping the lights on. Many will be shattered by these revelations, but it is necessary. I am clearing the threshing floor. The atmosphere of the vision grew increasingly dense as we approached December 2026. I saw a vision of a literal refiner's fire sweeping through Christian families. I saw a father and son standing in a kitchen. The son was mocking the father's archaic faith, threatening to report him to the local Harmony Committee. I saw the father's heart breaking, but he did not recant. He looked at his son with the same compassion I had seen in Jesus' eyes. November and December of 2026 will be the time of the great betrayal, Jesus told me. Even in the homes of the faithful, the sifting will occur. Brother will deliver up brother, but those who endure to the end will be saved. Do not fear the fire, Ariel. The fire only consumes what is not of me. Suddenly, the clock returned to the center of my vision. It was December 15th, 2026. The red hand was vibrating with an intensity that seemed to threaten the fabric of the vision itself. I saw the world again, but it looked like a map of glowing embers. The signs were no longer subtle. I saw the invisible seal, the fifth sign, glowing brightly on the foreheads of a small minority. To the world, they looked like troublemakers or her fanatics, but in the spirit, they were the only ones who were truly free. I saw a vision of a great mountain, and on top of it, a trumpet was being prepared. It wasn't made of gold or silver, but of light and sound. The year 2026 is the year of the final warning, Jesus declared. Every event you have seen, the digital silence of January, the compromise of February, the lawlessness of March, the purification of April, the shadows over Jerusalem in May, the fruits of the prison in June, the protection of July, the famine of the word in August, the false covenant of September, the mercy of October, and the falling of the leaders in November, all of it leads to the great separation. He showed me a vision of a wheat field. A great wind began to blow, a wind so powerful it seemed to come from the four corners of the universe. The chaff was lifted high into the air, spinning in a chaotic, dark cloud, while the wheat remained rooted, heavy with grain. "The wind is coming," he said. "By the end of 2026, there will be no more middle ground. There will be no more lukewarm souls. Everyone will have chosen a side. The religious will have become the persecutors, and the redeemed will have become the martyrs or the witnesses of the end." I felt the weight of my own life on earth. I thought of my mother, my brother, and Jason. I thought of the date I was currently living in, January 25th, 2026. I realized that the things I was seeing were not just possible futures. They were the blueprints of the judgment that had already begun. The death I had experienced on December 21st, 2025 was merely my induction into this greater reality. "Ariel," Jesus said, calling me back to the present moment in the vision. "The world looks at the calendar and sees a new year. I look at the heart and see the end of an age. You must tell them that the time for playing at religion is over. The fire is here." I saw one final image for the year 2026. A door. A massive, ancient door made of a wood that seemed to pulse with life. It was closing. It wasn't slamming shut, it was moving slowly, inexorably, with the weight of centuries behind it. There was still a sliver of light coming through the opening, but the gap was narrowing with every tick of the celestial clock. "The door of grace," he whispered. "It is still open, but the hand is on the latch." The vision did not end with the closing of the door. Instead, the heat intensified, and the light of Jesus' presence seemed to focus into a piercing beam that carved through the layers of the spiritual world. We began a descent that felt like passing through a thick, oily membrane. The air became a suffocating weight, smelling of iron, stagnant water, and a cold, ancient rot. "You must see the end of the religious path," Jesus said. His voice was no longer gentle. It was the voice of a judge whose patience had been exhausted by centuries of hypocrisy. We were in a place that looked like a distorted reflection of a grand cathedral, but the walls were made of frozen tears, and the floor was a mosaic of broken promises. There I saw the hell of the pious. These were not the obvious sinners of the world. These were the architects of religious systems. I saw a man who had been a world-renowned theologian. In life, his books had sold millions, and he had been a regular guest on news programs, explaining the metaphorical nature of God. Now, he was hunched over a desk made of ash, frantically trying to write a sentence that would grant him peace. But the ink turned into blood as soon as it touched the page. "He taught that I was a concept, not a king," Jesus whispered. "He stripped the power from my word to make it palatable to the proud. Now he is left with the logic of the void." I saw a group of women who had spent their lives in prayer circles. On earth, they were considered the pillars of their congregations. But here, they were separated by invisible walls of glass. They were forced to watch the videos of their own lives, not their public prayers, but the whispers in the kitchen, the social media comments meant to destroy a sister's reputation, the silent contempt they held for the unworthy. Their piety had been a weapon, and now that weapon was turned inward. "They used my name to build their own righteous," he said. "They loved the feeling of being chosen more than they loved the souls I died for. They created a God in their own image, a God who hated everyone they hated. They never knew me." Then the scene shifted back to the timeline of 2026, but with a terrifying clarity. The date December 31st, 2026 appeared, hovering like a guillotine blade over the world. The clock I had seen earlier was now a massive, pulsating entity. Each tick was a seismic event. I saw the rapture vision he had promised. But it wasn't a cinematic spectacle. It was a surgical extraction. I saw the world on the night of December 31st, 2026. The cities were filled with the feasting and mocking of Stephanims he had described. I saw a party in a luxury penthouse in Los Angeles where people were dressed in costumes mocking the end times. They were laughing, raising glasses of expensive wine, toasting to a new age of enlightenment. At that exact moment, a frequency hit the earth. It wasn't a sound the ears could hear, but a sound the spirit responded to. I saw a young man in a warehouse in a third world country working a night shift. He had the invisible seal. In a flash of light so white it made the sun look like a candle, he was gone. I saw a mother in a suburban home in Canada kneeling by her bed, gone. I saw an elderly man in a hospital bed in Jerusalem, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, gone. The world they left behind did not just despair, it went into a frenzy of delusion. I saw the news anchors on January 1st, 2027, though the vision was centered on the 2026 transition, explaining the disappearances. They spoke of molecular instability and alien intervention. I saw the religious leaders who were left behind. They were the most vocal in these explanations. They stood in their pulpits, sweating and trembling, telling their terrified congregations that the radical elements had been removed by the universal mind to allow for a new era of peace. The greatest lie is the one told from a pulpit, Jesus said. Those who were left behind were those who had the form of godliness but denied its power. In 2026, the sifting ends, the harvest is gathered, and the chaff is abandoned to the fire they claimed did not exist. The weight of this revelation was more than I could bear. I felt my spirit collapsing. I saw the faces of those I knew in the Ministry of Security, men who thought they were protecting Israel through technology, completely unaware that the real shield was being removed. I saw my mother's house. I saw the empty chair where she would have sat. The grief was a physical blow. Ariel, Jesus said, his hand gripping my shoulder with a strength that restored my focus. You have seen the 2026 threshold. You have seen the end of the year of the sifting, but you are being sent back to the beginning of this year. You are being sent to January 2026. Then came the jolt. I no longer had the body of a soldier, nor the blood of training in my veins. I was spirit, consciousness, and witness, as if I had been chosen to observe and then shout what I had seen to anyone who still had the courage to listen. I felt a sudden, violent pull. The celestial heights, the visions of 2026, the silence of the door, all of it blurred into a singular white-hot point of light. I coughed. I opened my eyes. The first thing I felt was the grit of the Iranian sand against my cheek. The second thing was the smell of cordite and burnt plastic. The third was the agonizing pain in my left ear. I breathed in and it felt like swallowing glass. I was back. The date on my tactical watch, cracked but still functioning, was December 21st, 2025. Beside me, lying on the ground, was the body of my companion, Jason. A flap of his vest was still on fire, a small, flickering orange flame that seemed absurdly small after the fire of Jesus' eyes. Blood trickled from the side of his neck, but he was breathing. I got on all fours and shook him hard with tears streaming from both my eyes. I shouted his name 1, 2, 10 times, and he slowly opened his eyes. He stared at me with a look that wasn't of this world and whispered, "I saw it too." The extraction team, led by Lieutenant Cohen, arrived minutes later. They looked at us as if we were ghosts. Cohen later told me that they had lost our vitals for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of flatline. 3 minutes according to the world. An eternity on the other side. During the following weeks of recovery in a secure facility, I said nothing. I couldn't. How do you explain to a military psychiatrist that the threat assessment for 2026 involves a celestial clock and a closing door of grace? How do you tell your commander that the nuclear facility in Kershaw was a distraction from the spiritual blackout coming in January? But today is January 25th, 2026. I'm sitting in a small room, the sun of Israel shining through the window, but I can still see the amber glow of January 31st approaching in the spirit. The silent sky is only days away. I've given up my secret mission, written my resignation, and signed it with tears in my eyes. Why, Ariel? My commander asked me, his voice full of a frustrated concern. I replied, because now I'm fighting another war, a war for souls, and I have sworn allegiance to another general. I live differently now. I sleep less. I pray more. I read the Bible every morning, and every day since December 21st, 2025 is a day stolen from death. I no longer speak of the future as I did before, because the future isn't an option, it's a judgment. And 2026 isn't just a number on a calendar, it's an open window in time, a cry in the sky, sand running through the last hourglass before the prophecies are fulfilled. I feel in my heart the need to warn anyone reading or hearing this testimony. Prepare yourselves. Not in the religious sense, but in the eternal sense. I'm not talking about joining a church or changing a few habits. I'm talking about true conversion. Total, painful, and saving. Because those who still live lukewarm will be the first to be shaken, and those who believe there's still time will be surprised, like in the days of Noah. I saw the clock. It was almost midnight. The number 2026 was not a symbol, it was a scream. Every month, every decision, every choice is part of a spiritual examination. The trumpets are already sounding for those who have ears to hear. Hell is not a fable. The rapture is not a theological option. And the return of Jesus is no longer something yet to come. It has already begun within the heart of those who wake up. Now or never. That's why I speak. That's why I shout. That's why I don't care if they think I'm crazy, a visionary, or a fanatic. Better crazy for Christ than lucid in hell. Better persecuted on earth than ignored in heaven. Friend, if you've made it this far, I implore you, don't wait for the perfect sign. Don't wait for everything to collapse. Don't wait for pain to force you to bend your knees. Bend them now voluntarily. There's only one way. His name is Jesus Christ. Not the Jesus they told you about, but the Jesus who reigns now, alive and glorious with eyes of fire and a voice of thunder. The Jesus I saw. The Jesus who brought me back. And if you feel a fire in your heart as you read these words, it's not emotion, it's a calling. It's time. It's the Spirit of God telling you, wake up, my child, before it's too late. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for staying with us until the end of this testimony. If you're still listening, it means something has deeply touched your heart. Perhaps it's not just a story, but a call that the Lord wanted you to hear today. We invite you to take a small action that can have a big impact. Write in the comments where you're following us from, so we can pray for you and your country in the days to come. If you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the words, visions, and revelations we share daily to prepare for what's about to happen. And most importantly, share this video with at least 3 people you truly care about. A family member, a friend, a brother, or sister in faith. Because sometimes a simple video can change the course of a life, awaken hope, or bring a distant heart back into the arms of God. May the Lord bless you and guide you in truth today and always.